Chapter 25. The crowd of the fierce and ravenously possessed were edging toward Constable Davidson. Behind him, the barricade was holding, yet he heard the local onlookers become panicked. There was now another, heavier patrol helicopter performing wider, sweeping rounds overhead. People shouted. Thunder edged in every corner. The dark blue and gray storm clouds were bathed in morning sunlight, dampening the sky overhead. The angry, hungry mob were spreading out, glowing yellow and orange, the strange wafting energy snaking outward and upward toward the storm clouds. Men, with me. Having released the holding clasp of his sidearm, he reluctantly withdrew and aimed. Instantly, audible sighs, groans, and screams erupted from the civilians he was sworn to protect. Off in the distance, the familiar wailing sound of oncoming police and emergency vehicles. Sully tried to get his attention, to tell the young pup to be careful, but his shouts were drowned out over the commotion happening in front of the Wales Millennium Center. His 4 patrolmen followed his orders, taking aim. "Do not fire until I give the signal. Understood?" The men nodded, all of them behind him. "I can't see you, morons. Sound out! Do not fire until I give the damn signal. Understand?" His probationary constables, variously and with varying confidence, audibly muttered, "Sir." Mr. Blue was excited. Beyond excited. Saber was infected by his grin, and let a large smile take over her beautiful face, accentuating her delicate feminine features. "Sproul is releasing the ambient excess energy he needs to maintain his various permutations. Do you know what that means?" "Good news?" Saber tightened her ponytail. The giddy Time Lord spun in a circle, straightened his tie, and continued working on the terminal. "The power is going to stabilize Purge, then safely secure Sproul in a convenient, easy-to-carry, travel-size avatar until we arrive at the vortex. Maybe I can finally get to Logopolis." The time agent placed her hands on her hips and yawned. Mr. Blue shrugged, his grin firmly in place. "Stop!" the cat shrieked. Mr. Blue's smile faded slightly. "Do me a solid and turn down the main power influx, love." He looked at Twill. She gingerly touched a few dials on the Shadow Proclamation Accord translator device. No, it's the..." Mr. Blue pointed to a large silver knob. Twill lowered it slightly. He turned his attention back to his work. "Getting there? Thank you." From where she stood, Twill could clearly see what was happening out front on the monitor. The outside urbaniform sprawl were breaking up, the group wandering and loosening their unison. Amber and orange light was spreading like smoke from some unkept fire. In the background, a crowd of the local people had grown, and it appeared they were scared. The townies were barely staying back behind the barricade. It seemed as if a riot were about to break out. Twill noted this. "Anything else I can help out with?" she asked. Saber didn't reply, but Mr. Blue briefly looked up at her and grinned. "Nah, give us a sec, Ben. Keep an eye on things." And he went on typing, quite settled in the Torchwood lab as Twill looked over Saber and the Time Lord's shoulder at the ensuing chaos about to erupt outside. "Sure thing," she said, and started petting the cat. The mob wasn't listening, and they were drawing upon the police line, and the choppers were so bloody loud, and the damn idiots behind the barricade were screaming bloody murder, and the probies kept shouting questions at him and the mob. They looked so wrathful, so starving. Coming closer. They won't listen, they just keep coming. Constable Andy Davidson fired into the possessed crowd. For a single instant, time stood still. Everything stopped. All was covered in a surreal calm. Another shot, then more. The other constables were pouring their clips into the oncoming monsters. Nothing happened at first, and suddenly the horrifying waves of noxious yellow and orange vapor were wafting everywhere. A fog of light and radiation, surely poison. Lightning kept striking, coming closer. Thunder pounding closer. Round after round came out of their chambers. "Stop!" the mob screamed. The constables were reloading. For a brief period, the mob of the relentlessly mad and hungry slowed, the yellow waves of energy streaming into the whale's Millennium Center. Andy thought it was going to stop now. Then they came again. The Time Lord in the cobalt suit yawned and stretched, looking at the readings. Power levels now reaching 93%. He skipped around the lab, patting Saber and Twill on the shoulders, as he passed them a couple of times. Saber smiled warily. Twill smiled politely. Something suddenly caught his attention and he stopped. Mid-skip, stared at the monitor for outside. What the bloody? Mr. Blue ran to it, gripped the grainy screen with his hands, watching in sheer terror as sprawl avatars were shot several times by the police constables outside. It was pure horror. He jumped over a railing and slammed onto the ground next to the Shadow Proclamation Accord translator device, frantically fumbling for the sonic modulator main power influx dial. He turned it up. Help! Sprawl was yelling. Help! Please! Mr. Blue leered at Twill. What have you done, you stupid monkey? He bellowed with a fury. You may have just killed this child. Twill stepped backward. I'm sorry. I was just trying to keep an eye on things. I must have accidentally turned it down all the way. I'm sorry. The Time Lord in the cobalt suit shook his head and then ran out. Saber crossed her arms, staring at Twill. It was an accident, I swear. I'm so sorry. The constable sputtered. Saber formulated her katana and followed her Time Lord companion to the chaos that awaited them both outside. Twill watched them on the monitor as they headed out. She smirked. The police had reloaded, their weapons trained on the mob, which was scattering, wandering aimlessly when Mr. Blue and Saber arrived. The energy the possessed crowd released was successfully being drawn into Purge to utilize. It was pouring thunder pounding over the ocean in the distance. The Time Lord ran towards the barricade, stepping in front of the sprawl crowd, followed by Saber. They were far enough away from the police line to have to shout at Constable Andy Davidson, whom, along with his men, were keeping a distance. The people around the area, the locals, were losing their minds. Andy could barely think, but he saw the two time travelers approach. Now, there were two more of them in this crowd to replace that awful yellow gas, was all he could think. He was panic-stricken. He couldn't think to call Twill inside, and he couldn't hear Sully pleading with him to see if these people were going to help. He could only see all these insane eyes, mostly red, but these two, one of them had a pair of crazy blue eyes. The woman's were silver. He was terrified and they were shouting at him. The woman had a sword. A damn sword! Andy fired. The round bounced off the woman's forehead, leaving carbon scoring and nothing else. She scowled. Everything now was complete chaos. Lightning and pouring rain. Bullets. Saber, meticulously and with superhuman speed, sliced her sword at the police constables, which were easily 100 feet away. However, her sword disappeared from her hands and appeared in the front of them instantly through a wormhole, slicing every single gun in two. Every constable was now weaponless and completely stunned. Andy watched his sidearms slide apart like in some damn fool magic trick. He stood, staring at his useless gun with horror in the rain, but not before he had fired off 2 rounds. The woman with the silver eyes was glaring at him, shouting something, screaming. The constable did not hear her over the thunder. Saber dropped to her knees next to Mr. Blue. The Time Lord lay crumpled on the street, bright orange liquid pouring from his neck and his stomach. She cried as his blood mixed with rain on the cold, wet pavement.